Committee on Homeland Security will come to order. Without objection, the chair may declare the committee in recess at any point. Without objection, the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Dela Cruz, is permitted to sit on the dais and ask questions of the witness. Before I start my opening comments today, I'd like to make a few administrative notes. First, and most importantly, today is the United States Army's birthday. We have purchased a birthday cake to the United States Army, and it is in the joint room for both parties, members, and staff to enjoy. Please, as you're having a piece of cake, reflect on the 248 years of men and women who've served our great nation in the United States Army. Also, before we start today, I want to point out that this is an oversight hearing, and it's the beginning of several that will follow, and I'm guessing that the party that holds the White House will differ in their opinions to the party not in the White House. That's okay. I'm certain we can all conduct ourselves without disrupting the decorum of this committee by using unparliamentary words to attack an individual's character. You can attack behavior, you can attack decisions, you can engage in debate, you can say doing this or that makes no sense, you can even say something is stupid. But you just can't say that an individual is stupid. And understand that it's a subtle difference, but it has been the standard of this committee for many chairmen before me, and it will be enforced by me too. Lastly, next week we will hold our first joint meeting of all the cyber-related subcommittees. The intent is to begin a paradigm shift in how we approach cybersecurity in a bipartisan, multi-committee fashion. We need a whole-of-government approach. We need to break down the silos in government and in Congress. Industry, and especially the administration's cyber folks, love this idea. All members of our cyber subcommittee should attend. It is a breakfast, and we'll host some of the nation's brightest cybersecurity experts. I encourage all members of the Committee of Homeland Security to engage and attend. The cyber border is just as important as any other border. In July, we're going to hold another administrative note here. We're going to hold a substantive markup that we also hope will be bipartisan, tentatively aiming for the first week back in session in July. We need to move early in July to deal with the reauthorization of the Chemical Facilities Anti-Terrorism Standards Statute, or CFATS. It's my hope we can do this and other legislation in a bipartisan way. And now for the business of the day. The purpose of this hearing is to receive testimony on Secretary Mayorkas's dereliction of duty. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. On February the 2nd, 2021, Alejandro Mayorkas was sworn in to be the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. He swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and faithfully discharge the duties of his office. Since then, the American people have suffered from a national security, humanitarian, and public safety disaster at the southwest border. A disaster that has turned every city into a border city and every state into a border state. In just over 2 years under Secretary Mayorkas, more people have entered our country illegally than in the 12 years of the Obama and Trump administrations combined. This includes more than 5.2 million apprehensions at the southwest border, more than 6.1 million apprehensions factoring in America's northern and maritime borders, and at least 1.5 million known gotaways, illegal aliens who slip across our border without being caught and are now at large in the United States. This should terrify every American. Based on Border Patrol statistics of criminal aliens they do catch, those gotaways could include as many as 1,180 aliens guilty of DUIs, 285 guilty of sexual assault, and more than 3 dozen guilty of murder. Last fall, an illegal alien struck and killed Florida Sheriff's Deputy Mike Hartwick before fleeing the scene. The alien had entered the country illegally in October 2021 in Texas and was sent back to Mexico, but at some point re-entered our country as a gotaway. An unknown number of national security threats are pouring across our border each and every day. Since October of last year, Border Patrol has reported nearly 10,000 arrests of Chinese nationals that have illegally crossed the southwest border, and the number continues to increase every month. I've confirmed that some of the Chinese nationals coming in have ties to the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army, and they've been released into the United States. That's all I can share at this point. We'll be holding a classified briefing in the near future on this for all members. DHS has no way to verify the identities and backgrounds of these individuals. They are almost always quickly released into the interior of our country to do who knows what. This is the height of madness, releasing unvetted individuals from our nation's most dangerous adversaries into our local communities. That's what Secretary Mayorkas is doing. With each and every one of these individuals, Mayorkas is putting our national security at risk. U.S. law states that one of the foremost duties of the Secretary of Homeland Security is to control and guard the borders of the United States, but Secretary Mayorkas has surrendered control of our southwest border to the Mexican cartels. Today, nothing comes in or out without the cartel's knowledge and tacit approval. They have seized full control, pushing not just historic numbers of illegal aliens across, but record amounts of drugs like fentanyl, which killed more than 71,000 Americans in 2021, a horrific new record. Fentanyl is now the leading cause of death for Americans ages 18 to 49. American children are attending the funerals of their friends who have died of fentanyl poisoning. According to one recent study, more than 1,500 kids under the age of 20 died from fentanyl poisoning just in 2021, more than 4 times as many as in 2018. Secretary Mayorkas has put all families at risk, even families visiting from overseas. The Lavenier family from France tragically lost their 19-month-old daughter, Honora, to fentanyl poisoning when on vacation in Florida. This beautiful little girl was exposed to fentanyl left behind by the previous occupant of their rental unit. How can any family in America feel safe when a stay in a hotel or an Airbnb could end up with the death of a child? The devastating consequences don't stop there. Some other highlights of the Secretary's open borders policy include the following: more than 350,000 encounters of unaccompanied minors. The administration has since lost control of at least 85,000 of these children. Tragically, many of them are being trafficked, abused, and exploited. According to a damning New York Times investigation, many of these children are being forced to do dangerous jobs that violate the U.S. child labor laws, all because of Mayorkas' decision to stop vetting the sponsors. From October 1 to 2020 to March 2023, Border Patrol recorded nearly 28,000 arrests of illegal aliens with criminal backgrounds, approximately 6,000 more total arrests than the previous 4 fiscal years combined. These numbers do not include data from states like Texas, which has apprehended hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens and recorded more than 27,000 arrests of illegal aliens itself. In FY21, Border Patrol discovered 568 dead migrants at the southwest border, nearly double the 254 found in FY20. In FY22, the number jumped to 853. More than 1,700 migrants have died on U.S. soil while trying to enter this country illegally on Mayorkas' watch, people he encouraged to make the journey. Mayor Adams of New York recently stated that more than half of the hotel rooms in New York City are now filled with illegal aliens. Cities like Chicago are putting illegal aliens ahead of their own citizens, allocating millions of dollars to house and care for those arriving to their city, infuriating residents and neighbors like South Shore who won't get those resources. In May, Chicago Mayor Lightfoot stated, "We simply have no more shelters." Medicaid spending on emergency medical services for illegal aliens more than doubled in FY20 to FY21 from around $3 billion to more than $7 billion. This suffering and death falls squarely on the shoulders of the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, a man who has been derelict in his duty to protect America. Since his first day in office, Secretary Mayorkas has intentionally undermined America's immigration laws and ended meaningful border security enforcement, and in its place implemented an extreme agenda of open borders. The vast majority of those crossing our borders illegally are coming not because of COVID-19, climate change, or because CBP doesn't have enough funding. They're coming for economic reasons, and they're coming in record numbers because Mayorkas left the door open, unlocked. Those individuals typically possess no legitimate claim to asylum, and under prior administrations, both Democrat and Republican, most would have been quickly deported. The difference now, Mayorkas and his policies. Yet not once has he taken responsibility for this mess. The mountain of evidence this committee has gathered proves that Alejandro Mayorkas has been derelict in his duty as the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Upon assuming office, he immediately went to work reversing and tearing down the effective border policies of the last two administrations, replacing them with an open borders policy of mass catch and release. He has also repeatedly violated laws passed by this Congress. To date, our investigation has uncovered nearly a dozen violations of statutes and court orders. Consider just a few examples. The evidence shows that Mayorkas has repeatedly violated the law that prohibits mass parole of aliens into the country. The statute makes clear parole is only to be granted on a case-by-case and temporary basis for an urgent humanitarian reason or significant public benefit. Instead, Mayorkas has done the opposite, directing and overseeing a release of hundreds of thousands of aliens via mass parole in just 2 years through various programs, including more recently his CBP-1 app. The evidence also shows Mayorkas has violated the clear language of the Immigration and Nationality Act, requiring illegal aliens to be detained while their claims are resolved. At his direction, millions of illegal aliens have been released into the country through a program called Alternatives to Detention, via other mass parole, or with a notice to appear in court. And DHS's own data shows that when illegal aliens are not detained at all or are only detained for a short time, then released into the interior, they are almost never removed. Mayorkas and his defenders like to claim that we simply don't have detention space for the historic number of illegal aliens being drawn to the border by his disastrous policies, which is the epitome of circular reasoning. You don't get to break the law in order to fix the consequences of your reckless decisions. The evidence further shows Mayorkas has also violated the laws regarding the deportation of illegal aliens. Illegally entering the United States is a criminal, deportable offense. Mayorkas has decided enforcing that law is just optional. Passed by Congress, but he can just make it optional. First, he has issued guidance making it harder for ICE to detain and deport the vast majority of illegal aliens in this country. As a result, deportations have plummeted, and the number of illegal aliens on ICE's non-detained docket has grown by more than 2 million people in just 2 years. It gets worse. Mayorkas has flagrantly violated the laws requiring him to detain illegal aliens. His own acting ICE director, Tay Johnson, told Congress in April that ICE had actually been releasing hundreds of illegal aliens into the country, into our communities. When I last checked, the United States was a nation of laws. We expect our leaders to follow the laws that Congress passes, and those who fail to do so should be exposed and face the consequences. The Constitution is clear. Congress writes the laws, and officers like Mr. Mayorkas are sworn to enforce them. No one is above the law, not even the Secretary of Homeland Security. His failure to uphold his oath and follow the law has been the driving force behind the disaster at the border. Mayorkas has consistently made statements to Congress and the American people that demonstrate either dishonesty or gross incompetence, perhaps even both. He said at least 19 separate times some variation of the border is secure, even telling members of this committee in 2021 that the border was no less secure than previous. He also claimed to have operational control of the border per the definition of the Secure Fence Act of 2006. Border Patrol Chief Raul Ortiz confirmed to this committee in March that DHS in fact did not have operational control of the border. Only after this did Mayorkas backtrack and tell the Senate later in March that no secretary has ever had such control per the definition. Mayorkas has claimed his policies are not responsible for the crisis, but they are. He claimed he was handed a dismantled system. He wasn't. He claimed that DHS is promptly expelling illegal aliens. They aren't. Our investigation has unearthed nearly 80 occasions on which Mayorkas has been outright dishonest or misleading, and other instances in which he has displayed unacceptable ignorance about the basic aspects of the ongoing crisis. Dereliction of duty is a serious matter. I spent 24 years in the Army. I know what it means. It means someone has either willfully or negligently failed to do their duty, or has done such a poor job that there is no reasonable excuse. When that individual is the cabinet secretary who swore an oath to defend the Constitution and the homeland, the charge is even more serious. Again, today marks the United States Army's 248th birthday. As a West Point graduate, as I said, I served 24 years. I know what dereliction of duty is when I see it, and as a commissioned officer, I was responsible for holding those guilty of it accountable. There is zero doubt in my mind that Secretary Mayorkas has been derelict of his duty. As the people's elected representatives, this committee has a duty to investigate Mayorkas and bring any wrongdoings to the American people. What we have found thus far is damning. To date, our investigation has discovered that he has violated the laws of the United States, abused the authority of his office, and betrayed the public trust through repeated dishonest and misleading statements to Congress and the American people, while also demonstrating gross incompetence. I cannot imagine why President Biden, who is charged with defending the American people as Commander-in-Chief, would continue to tolerate this. Our investigation will show the President why he should fire Mayorkas immediately, or own this failure himself. This isn't about politics or policy or disagreements. It's about law and order and the safety of the American people. It's about whether a cabinet secretary has followed the law, upheld his oath, and been faithful to the public trust. The American people want answers to this crisis. They deserve the truth. Unfortunately, Alejandro Mayorkas has been derelict in his duty as the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. The cartels are thriving, migrants are suffering, and Americans are dying. Their blood is on Secretary Mayorkas' hands. I hope every member of this committee works together to fix this disaster. I now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Thompson, for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Americans have gotten used to political theater from congressional Republicans, but this hearing is a new low. You don't have to look further than the title to know that the hearing is a sham. Calling a hearing and saying case closed before you've heard any testimony is not legitimate oversight. It's obvious this hearing isn't really about border security. It's not even really about Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas or the Department of Homeland Security. It's about partisan politics. It's about House Republican leadership catering to its most extreme MAGA members who want to impeach someone, anyone at all. It's about trying to make good on GOP backroom deals to elect a speaker, raise the debt ceiling, and stave off a mutiny in the Republican ranks. If the hearing title alone doesn't make it obvious, just look at who the majority has invited to testify. The last time this committee called Mr. Wolf to testify, he was serving a role as acting Secretary of Homeland Security. He was asked to testify to the committee's annual hearing on threats to the homeland, but he refused to appear. He was subpoenaed and ultimately defied that subpoena. Mr. Wolf was a no-show at a hearing to inform Congress on terrorist threats facing our nation. But he comes to the Hill twice in the last week to appear before the Judiciary Committee and here today to engage in political gamesmanship. Perhaps Mr. Wolf is also trying to distract from his abysmal tenure at DHS, a tenure that included the department's intentionally taking children from their parents at the border, changing and delaying a report on Russian interference in the 2020 election, and misusing DHS personnel to crack down on peaceful protesters in Portland. As it turns out, he was even serving unlawfully as acting secretary, having been appointed outside the department's succession orders. In fact, Mr. Wolf was the 5th person to run DHS and the second to do so unlawfully in less than 3 years under President Trump, a stark reminder of the chaos and dysfunction of that administration. I expect that today's Republicans will try to rewrite the history of the Trump administration and its border security and immigration policies. But the truth is, under the last administration, DHS took children from their parents, forced individuals fleeing violence and persecution to wait in Mexico, and expelled unaccompanied children at our border. The truth is, the last administration dismantled our lawful immigration system to the point where it could barely function. The policies were not only terribly cruel, but also incredibly ineffective. They didn't address fundamental border security challenges, fix our broken immigration system, or respond to the ongoing global migration phenomenon. Instead, they made the problem worse. For example, the number of encounters at the border jumped sharply after President Trump implemented Title 42, and they made vulnerable people suffer. That is the mess the Biden administration inherited, and that is what Secretary Mayorkas has had to deal with since taking office. Mr. Chairman, legitimate oversight follows the facts, and the facts is that the Biden administration's plan to address these challenges are working. The number of Border Patrol encounters have plummeted by 70% since the Biden administration ended Title 42 last month. The number of overall border encounters have dropped by 50% in that time, due in large part to DHS's hard work under Secretary Mayorkas' leadership. The Biden administration has reestablished lawful pathways for migrants to access the asylum system. It has also utilized parole on a case-by-case basis for those fleeing certain totalitarian or communist regimes in our hemisphere. At the same time, it has made clear that our borders are not open and those arriving outside lawful pathways will be sent home. Recent deportation and removal numbers reflect that hard reality for many. Unlike its predecessor, the Biden administration is enforcing border and immigration laws in an orderly, humane way, consistent with precedents set by prior administrations of both parties. Some may not like that, but those are policy differences and nothing more. You don't impeach a cabinet secretary because you don't like their policies, and you certainly don't impeach a cabinet secretary to appease extreme members of your political party. Secretary Mayorkas is fulfilling his duty under the law and to the American people. If the Republican majority doesn't like what he's doing, they should work with Democrats to pass bipartisan border security and immigration reform legislation. Apparently, they prefer political theater and sloppy, inaccurate, quote, unquote, report instead. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted to the record, and I'd like, without objection, to enter into the record the DHS order of secession, which shows that Mr. Wolf had the authority to serve as secretary. Without objection, so